Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me today. Last week, my wife and I got sick, and so unfortunately did not give me the opportunity to record this video. But without further ado, today I want to talk about the process in installing the LP Aventure lift kit. It took me about a total of 14 hours to install this, so I started early in the morning. By the time I finished it, it was the following day, probably around 2 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, if I didn't have all the additional tools that I ended up purchasing like the week before, it would have been a very tedious process. But fortunately, I had all the right tools to be able to get the job done efficiently. But yep, here is the video kind of showing you what the process was. But if you guys have any questions about this particular lift kit, why I purchased it, I will include some of that information on this video. But if you are deciding for yourself that you're going to install your own lift kit, as far as the spacer kit, Zane wants to say hi to everybody. Say hi. Hi. Say hi. Okay. Okay, you gotta be quiet, okay? Hold on. Shh. Zane's fixing his little tractor. Full disclaimer, I am not a professional. I'm not a mechanic. This was just somewhat easy for me to be able to save money in doing my own install. So yep, here we go. All right, so the first process in beginning the installation of the spacer kit up front is, number one, removing this brake line bracket. Secondly, the ABS sensor has two clips that need to be removed. That would be this one here, and then this one right up here. Once the ABS sensor clips are removed, then you have these two bolts here. That is the bottom suspension bolts. Both of those need to be removed. So right on the back side of the strut here, this is part of the end link. I also believe that that is part of the sway bar disconnect. So that also needs to be removed. Be cautious of that. When I reinstalled it, I stripped it. So just be very cognizant of your torque specs when you are reinstalling all the equipment. Lastly, for this section, you're gonna unmount all the bolts here to release the strut and then perform the installation of the spacer. All right, so the next step is to remove 3 bolts from the suspension arm. So that would be this one here, and then these two right up here. Remove the strut, install the handbrake cable spacer, install the brake line spacer. Next, we need to remove the subframe bracket bolts. So this whole section is the rear subframe. What we're going to do after the differential is secured with the jack, we are going to be removing the bolts for that part of the subframe, and then also the bolts right under here for this section of the subframe. This is the spacer that will be installed on the rear section of the subframe. And then this is the spacer that's going to be installed on the front portion of the subframe. As well, on the suspension arm, this is the spacer that is installed there. Once those steps are completed, we reinstall the rear strut and then remount this sway bar, knuckle, and link. And then lastly, to complete it, we're going to install the exhaust hangers that come with the lift kit. Here, if you go into, the idea is to So that one here, on both sides, it causes this whole rear end to drop. So again, very important to have that jack in place under your differential. Once I got all that set up, I went ahead and I installed the 2-inch spacer kit. So I did let a little bit of pressure out of this jack to allow the back frame to drop to where I had room to install these spacers. So the spacers go between, I guess you could call this like some type of support bushing, and then this is actually the spacer right up against the frame, and then these devices here. So same concept right there, that is the spacer. And then here is that other spacer that I installed. Okay, so I want to just highlight my intentions as far as getting the LP Aventure spacer lift kit. First and foremost, obviously I'm aware that this isn't going to be for everybody. Spacer versus an actual suspension lift. For me, it was coming down to a couple different things. First off was budget purposes, and secondly, not only was it going to be expensive to purchase a suspension lift, but also the work and expenses entailed in having somebody install it. So the big reason why, again, I got the spacer kit was, one, budget wise, and secondly, I really enjoy being able to do things on the vehicle myself, as opposed to trying to take it somewhere to have somebody else install something that I'm trying to do myself. For me, this is a huge learning curve, and so for me to be able to look at PDF instructions and then see a step-by-step process how to install this spacer kit, that is the huge reason why I picked LP Aventure. The second reason why I decided to go with LP Aventure is any time that I reach out to them, they are pretty prompt as far as getting back to me and then giving me as much information as they can possibly provide. So if you're considering a spacer kit, I hope the information I provided helps in your decision-making process. So hit that like, smash that subscribe, and tap that bell for future notifications. Until next time, enjoy the adventure.